The memory of that night, even after 5 long years, remains as sharp as shattered glass, slicing into his mind every time he closes his eyes. It was a torrential winter evening. In the intimate confinement of the car, the warmth from the heater mingled with the gentle scent of jasmine from her hair, the woman he loved more than life itself. They had just left a bridal boutique, excitedly painting the vision of a sunlit little home for the following spring. The golden glow from the dashboard illuminated her radiant smile and sparkling eyes. Everything was unfolding as beautifully as a dream. And then, that dream was violently torn apart. A blinding, merciless white light from an oncoming truck that had suddenly lost control plunged directly into his vision. The frantic wail of the horn tore through the night, the screech of tires burning against the slick asphalt. In a desperate, futile instinct, he swerved and threw his body over hers. A deafening collision, the sickening sound of metal crushing and snapping, the metallic stench of blood fiercely intertwining with the acrid smell of burning rubber. When he agonizingly opened his eyes amidst the wreckage, his body bruised and bleeding, the freezing rain was still falling. She was lying perfectly still in his arms, but the sparkling eyes from moments before had closed. Her faint breath slowly faded, then extinguished completely, as weightless as a leaf detaching from a branch. On her limp wrist, the glass face of her keepsake watch was shattered. The second hand twitched weakly a few times, then permanently stopped. It was 6:42. She departed, taking with her a spring that had yet to arrive. Since that day, the metal casing of that broken watch was always cold, worn unnaturally smooth by his relentless, unconscious habit of rubbing his thumb over it for 5 agonizing years. The jagged cracks spiderwebbing across the glass face were like a tactile map of a fractured soul. He did not wear it on his wrist. He kept it in his left breast pocket, heavy against his heart, a cold iron anchor chaining him to the bottom of an ocean of grief. While the rest of the world spun gracefully through the changing of seasons, through the brilliance of spring blossoms and the quiet shedding of autumn leaves, he remained stubbornly, fiercely trapped in that exact, agonizing moment of 6:42. He had survived, and that was the greatest tragedy of his life. In the silent courtroom of his own mind, he served as both the judge and the condemned. He sentenced himself to a life devoid of light. His apartment was a tomb of permanently drawn curtains and suffocating dust. He ate without tasting, the food turning to ash on his tongue. He slept only when his body betrayed his willpower, and even then, his dreams were slashed by glaring headlights and the screech of tires. Whenever a flicker of warmth threatened to enter his life, a sudden burst of laughter from the street below, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, his fingers would instinctively seek out his chest pocket. He would press the broken watch against his skin until it bruised, a physical reminder that he had no right to smile. He had no right to look toward the future when the future of the woman he loved had been stolen. He transformed into a ghost, guarding a graveyard of what-ifs. But nature, in its infinite and quiet wisdom, always finds a way to force the tightly closed buds of our suffering to finally break open. It happened on a Tuesday in late November. The air was brittle and biting, carrying the distinct metallic scent of an impending frost. Unable to bear the suffocating silence of his 4 walls, he wandered out to the edge of town, where the concrete surrendered to an old, dense pine forest. A swollen stream cut through the heart of the woods, its waters churned into a violent, frothy white by days of heavy, unseasonal rain. He stood at the muddy bank, a solitary shadow wrapped in a dark coat, silently watching the roaring water. As he always did, he reached into his pocket. He pulled out the watch, cradling it in his numb, trembling palm. He stared at the frozen hands at 6:42, trying to summon the familiar, agonizing sting of his guilt. Perhaps it was the numbing cold in his fingertips. Perhaps it was a sudden, violent gust of wind that whipped through the pines. Or perhaps the universe had simply decreed that the debt of his suffering had been paid in full. The silver casing slipped. In a fraction of a second, time, which had been completely frozen for 5 years, suddenly accelerated into a terrifying blur. The watch tumbled through the empty air, catching a pale, mocking glint of light, before plunging with a silent splash into the roaring, icy current. A primal, guttural sound tore through his throat. He did not think. He did not calculate the depth or the freezing temperature of the water. He threw himself forward, plunging knee-deep, then waist-deep into the violent rapids. The cold hit him like a crushing blow, driving the air from his lungs. The dark water, swirling with mud, roared in his ears like 1,000 angry voices. He fell to his knees, gasping, the water rising to his chest, soaking his heavy coat. He thrust his hands into the freezing darkness, clawing blindly at the slippery, algae-covered stones. Frantic, possessed. His fingernails scraped against sharp shale, tearing the beds. The skin of his knuckles split open, but he felt no pain, only a suffocating, blinding panic. I can't lose it. I can't lose her. I can't let her die all over again. He wasn't just searching for a piece of broken machinery. In his desperate mind, he was back on that highway. He was trying to pry open the crushed metal of the car door. He dug, he scraped, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the freezing river water, his breath coming in ragged, choking sobs. But there was nothing. Only the relentless force of the water. His muscles began to seize from the cold. His lungs burned. Exhausted, utterly defeated, he collapsed backward, sitting in the rushing shallows. He lifted his hands from the water. They were empty, shaking violently, his knuckles raw and bleeding freely, the crimson drops instantly washed away by the stream, leaving no trace. He stared at his empty hands. The panic slowly began to recede, replaced by a profound, bottomless stillness. And then, in that moment of absolute exhaustion, he felt it. He felt the current rushing over his torn skin. It stung fiercely, but it also cleansed. He looked down at the water swirling violently around his waist. It was moving with absolute purpose, carrying fallen branches, soil, and dead leaves, embracing everything broken and discarded, and washing it all away toward the vast, open ocean. He realized, with a clarity that hit him harder than the freezing water, that the river did not negotiate. It did not flow backward. It did not stop to mourn the leaves it tore from the branches. It only flowed forward. The watch, his anchor, his punishment, his 6:42, was gone, swept away. For the first time in 5 years, he looked up at the sky. The heavy gray clouds were beginning to part, revealing a fragile twilight blue, the color of a healing bruise. The wind whispered through the ancient pines, sounding like a long, drawn-out sigh of relief. She is not in that broken glass, a voice whispered in the absolute depths of his mind. She is not in the frozen hands of a dead clock. The awakening bloomed in his chest, painful but breathtakingly warm. She was the wind in the pines. She was the light breaking through the clouds. She was the very water rushing over his wounded hands, returning to the source, boundless and free. He had spent 5 years trying to force the river of time to flow backward. He had turned himself into a rigid stone, standing in the middle of the current, gathering nothing but the cold moss of his own self-reproach. He was suffocating his own life, but doing so was not honoring hers. To honor the dead is not to wither away with them. It is to live fully, deeply, and gently the life they were denied. Slowly, painfully, he stood up. The crushing weight in his chest, the iron anchor he had carried for so long, was gone. He stood on the muddy bank, soaked, shivering, but for the first time in half a decade, he was truly breathing. He closed his eyes, let the cold wind wash over his face, and finally, with a fractured heart breaking wide open to let the light in, he forgave himself. You know, we all carry our own shattered watches. We hoard our regrets, our what-ifs, clutching them to our chests, naively believing that if we punish ourselves enough, we can somehow alter a past that has already turned to stone. But this universe operates on the beautiful and utterly ruthless law of impermanence. Everything flows. To resist the current is to invite suffering. To accept it is to find peace. The storm does not come to destroy your path. It comes to wash away the heavy debris you no longer need to carry, leaving behind a sky vast enough for you to breathe once more. The art of living is neither careless drifting nor fearful clinging. It is a sensitive, conscious flowing. May you find the courage to unclench your tightly closed fists. May you let the river carry away what is broken. And may you forgive yourself, simply for trying to survive. What are your thoughts on the boundary between remembering the past and imprisoning yourself in it? Please leave your reflections in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, share it and subscribe to Soulscape Whispers so we can continue spreading true values of life together. Peace be with you.